Ever had a bad day? When peace feels far away and everything's heavy, you don't have to hold it alone. Prayer draws you near to the ever-present God. Where do you turn when life gets tough? Closer.
This past June, I actually moved to Austin. And so since then, I've been trying to make new friends with the people around. Yeah, Dave, thank you for the wave. I've been trying to make new friends. You guys are like sort of friends to me, but I want adult friends too, because if not, it's weird. And so I've been trying to make new friends. Yeah, I've been trying to make new friends, but it's really hard. It is so hard as an adult to make new friends. This is something that no one tells you before it happens, is that it's hard because you have to actually be intentional about it. It's not like high school or even college where you can just be friends with people because you just happen to be in the same room as them a lot, or you have class together, or you're on sports together. Like, there's not proximity friends really as much in adulthood. I have to go get in my car after work and I'm tired and go drive probably to Timbuktu because I live in Round Rock. No shade to the Round Rock people, but it's far from everything. I have to drive out to meet up with someone new, and then I have to sit there, and it's awkward. It's so awkward making a new friend. I don't know, and I don't even think I'm that awkward of a person. Don't tell me if you think that I am. No one nod right now. But I don't even think that I'm that awkward of a human being. But dang it, they're nodding. I don't even think I'm awkward as a human being, but it's awkward to sit and try and get to know someone new. And you're just sitting at probably a Chewy's eating creamy jalapeno. And yeah, and you're just trying to get to know these new people. And it's tough because you don't know each other, and you're trying to ask all the right questions and make sure that they like me. And so what I'll do, guys, you're going to think I'm a creep and a stalker, and I'm sorry if you do, but I will deeply stalk someone's Instagram before meeting up with someone new. I know maybe it's weird, but I'll be in the tag post from like 2017 looking at what any possible connection I could make with this person, especially if I'm nervous to meet them and I really want them to like me extra. I am like, oh my gosh, I love Lorde because I've seen that they went to a Lorde concert 7 years ago or something. This is crazy, but I'll even go as far as to look up their Spotify listening history to see if we have any, I'm sorry, I know it's weird, but to look and see if we like any of the same music. And so I know that that's creepy, but it's just because I want people to like me. But that's how it is when we make new friends, right? It's always going to be a little bit awkward. We always want to be putting our best foot forward in these conversations. We want them to see this persona, a curated persona of what we want them to see. And I'm not going to say that it's entirely fake, because it's not. It is parts of me. It is usually music that I actually do like. And it's things that are real. I'm not just lying, but it's also just not, it's also just not entirely genuine. And so that is how I feel about making a new friend. And I think that that's probably pretty typical. But if that's how it is, making a new friend, then I'm just wondering how that might translate to our prayer life and how that might influence and change our relationship with God. If with new friends, we're always seeking to put our best foot forward and let them see what we think that they want to see, wouldn't we do the same thing with God? Like, it's God that we're talking about. This isn't just some new friend. This is the King of Kings. And so, of course, I want God to like me. Of course, I want to pray the things that I think God wants to hear. And that's got to be pretty typical, right? Because last week, it was hard because Ren talked about casting everything that we can't carry. But I don't really want God to necessarily be involved with everything that I can't carry, because there's stuff about that I don't want God to see, that doesn't fit into this persona that I want God to see, that I know he'll like. I don't want God to be necessarily a part of my anxiety or my mental health struggle or any feelings that I have about him, or my doubt or my fear or my anger or my thoughts about other people and my judgments about other people and the way that I feel about boys. And I don't want God to see that. That does not fit in with the image that I want him to see. What I would like to present to God is what's clean and nice and good and pure and whatever. And once, like with friends, I'm not saying that that's completely fake. Those things are real. There is good stuff. It's not completely genuine. I just don't want him to see the bad. But it's hard to reconcile that with casting everything that we can't carry. And so I wanted to sort of figure out today, like, what is the right way? What's the correct way to pray, and where could I go and find that? How do we do this well? Because I feel like we all probably feel that same pressure to pray well, right? Like it's tough, and we want God to like us. And so I just wanted to figure out what was right. So I decided to look at the guy who would, of course, know how to pray, Jesus. Because the Son of God would, of course, know how to talk to God. That's his dad. And so I wanted to look at what Jesus had to say about prayer. And so today we're going to be in Matthew 6. If you guys just want to turn there in your Bibles now. Matthew 6 is smack in the middle of the Sermon on the Mount. The Sermon on the Mount is a sermon on a mountain. You guys are smart, so you probably figured that out. But it's a sermon on a mountain, and it's one of Jesus' most famous sermons, probably the most famous sermon ever. And it was given on a mountain, and a lot of it was just very practical advice for believers on how they can conduct themselves as Christians or how they can follow Jesus really well. It's Jesus speaking to a really large crowd. And so we will be in Matthew chapter 6, where he actually talks about prayer a lot, and he gives advice on how we can do it. So Matthew chapter 6, verse 7, it'll start with, it goes, verse 7. And when you pray, now keyword there, when you pray, there is an assumption that we will pray. It's not really something that's an option or a choice. It's not Jesus suggesting that we pray. It's an assumption that a believer and follower of Jesus will be in communication with God through prayer. So, and when you pray, do not keep on babbling like pagans, for they think that they will be heard for their many words. He's warning here against praying as the pagans did, because in this time they thought that the quality of their prayer was measured by how long it was. Not by really what they said. They thought that really repetitive prayers and really long drawn out prayers with a lot of big fancy words were more likely to be heard by God. They were just better for whatever reason. They were trying to pray just like us. They were trying to pray the right way. And so they also, Jesus here is calling out the hypocrisy of these people, because a lot of them would pray only so that other people could hear, not even just God, but so that other people could hear and think that they were really holy and really impressive. They would use big words that other people didn't know to try and seem really good. They wanted to pray the right way, but Jesus is warning against this. It keeps going in verse 8. Jesus says, "Do not be like them, for your Father knows what you need before you ask him." Jesus here is saying that we don't have to pray like the pagans did. We don't have to pray really long, drawn out prayers. Not that we can't. We can pray for as long as we want. But it doesn't have to look any sort of way or use any sort of words, because God knows what we need before we ask him. But that always leads me to the question of, if God knows what we need before we ask him, and he knows what we're going to pray before we even say it, why do it? Right? Like, what's the point of that? Why should we do that? But I think that we should ask and we should pray all the time, because it's not really about that. The purpose of prayer is to get closer to God. That's the point. And so through asking and through praying and just spending time in his presence, we will get closer to God through that. God just wants to be he's after our hearts. He wants us to be real and authentic in our prayer. It's not like, we don't have to be like the pagans where we just pray what we think he wants to hear, even though that seems like a really easy thing to do. But we won't be able to truly get closer with God until we are authentic with him, until we're real with him. Because I can say for my friends and my friendships, the ones, the friendships where I was just meeting up with them and saying what I thought they wanted to hear and saying, oh yeah, I listened to this music, and it's not even true, and I was just presenting a perfectly curated persona for them. I can say that what happened is nothing. We are not friends. It didn't work. It stayed awkward. It stayed stiff because I wasn't being real. I wasn't being the real me. And so, but then my really close friends, I'm completely vulnerable with them. They see me for who I am. My family, my friends, the people that I really love, I'm not hiding what I like or who I am or any of that. They're the ones who are able to see the real me. And our relationship with God is the same way. How could he be close to us unless we are surrendering all of who we are and all of what we believe? Because God doesn't just want us to pray what we think he wants to hear. He wants us to be genuine and authentic. God is after our hearts here. Verse 8 says, again, that he knows what we need before we ask him. He already sees us for who we are exactly. He already sees the brokenness and sees the pain, but in being close with him and in spending time with him in prayer, we're able to draw near to him. It just has to be authentic. I think about my friends and the people that I love so much. And I'm like, imagine if your best friend had something going on, something really bad, and they were hurting and they were struggling and they felt some kind of way towards you, or they were mad and you knew about it, but instead of them telling you, they just acted like everything was fine. They just said to you the things that they thought that you wanted to hear. They weren't being genuine about how they felt. It would be almost offensive. This is someone that you love so much, but they're not willing to trust you enough to be who they really are. Like, it would hurt. It would be hurtful. And so imagine how much more our Father in heaven feels about us. This is the God who stepped out of heaven so that he could have a relationship with you. He stepped out of heaven and died so that he could have a relationship with you. That's how important this is. And he did that knowing exactly who you are. He did that knowing exactly all of your brokenness, all of what you think, all of the bad, gross stuff inside of you. God did it anyway. That's how good he is, and that's how important it is to him to be in relationship with him. But in order to reach that relationship, in order to reach the intimacy and the fellowship with God that we were literally designed for, that he created us for, we have to trust God with who we truly are. We have to be authentic. We have to be not just what he wants us to, what we think he wants us to be, but be who we actually are and what we actually believe. Jesus actually gives sort of a way that we can pray, because this is really hard to do. This is really hard for me, I'll confess. It's hard for me to be real with God. I don't want him to see the bad stuff. I'm worried that he would judge me or not like me or whatever it may be. I don't want to. It's hard and it's humbling to be vulnerable like that. And I think that's probably a pretty common feeling in this room, that it's tough to be vulnerable with God. It's tough to say the things that are real. And I think that comes from, there's a lot of people in the world that will actually see the real us and they will leave. They will walk away. And so it's difficult to trust that God won't do the same, but Jesus actually gives a model of kind of how we can pray, or things that we can pray about in a real way. And this was completely radical at this time because of the way that they prayed with all the hypocrisy. And so Matthew, we're going to keep going. It's verse 9. It says, "This then is how you should pray. Our Father in heaven, hallowed be your name. Your kingdom come, your will be done on earth as it is in heaven. Give us today our daily bread, and forgive us our debts as we have also forgiven our debtors. And lead us not into temptation, but deliver us from the evil one." This might seem like some kind of stiff prayer, but this is Jesus being very real and showing us how to do it. And so he starts just by saying, "Our Father in heaven." That's the very personal title of God. It's our Father. This is someone that we can come to with anything. That's how Jesus starts it, not with Lord, but with our Father. And he says, "Hallowed be your name." That means his name is holy. That's Jesus saying what he really feels about God. He's saying your name is holy and it's set apart. And I think that praising God is a really wonderful thing to incorporate into prayer, and it can really benefit your relationship with God. But if that's not how you feel, you don't have to say that. Say what is really on your mind. And then he says, "Your kingdom come, your will be done on earth as it is in heaven." That's Jesus giving us sort of permission to admit that our ways are not best. That's vulnerability with God. It's saying, I don't know, I can't be in the driver's seat. It's not right. He says, "Give us today our daily bread." That's Jesus asking for his daily needs. That's asking for just the bread and the food that we need to live. And we can and should do that too. And I think that this is an area where we get caught up and we hesitate to be genuine, and we hesitate to ask for what we really want or what we really need. Give us today our daily bread, but we don't ask for sometimes either the small things or the big things, because either we think maybe it's too big, it's too much, I can't ask for that, or we think I could not possibly inconvenience God with this little minuscule thing. I don't want to bother God with my friend drama or my boy drama or my whatever, my little anxiety. Either way. But the thing is, there is no prayer request. There's nothing that is too big or too small for God. Because on one hand, there's nothing too big for the God who created the heavens and the earth and does impossible things. But then there's also nothing too small or insignificant for the Father who created you and knitted you together in your mother's womb and loves you so much. We can go to him and ask for whatever is on our hearts. We don't have to just ask for the things that we think he wants us to ask for. We can ask for the big stuff. He keeps going and he says, and forgive us our debts as we have also forgiven our debtors. That's asking for forgiveness. That's bringing sin to God in prayer. That's tough. I don't want to do that at all. That's so hard. It's saying, God, I have done something and I need forgiveness. Here's what it is. And God, it's hard for me to forgive others. Help me do it. That's admitting and letting God in on the brokenness in our heart. But when we do that, he can help. He can help us get out of that sin. He can help us to forgive other people and let go of that bitterness. And then he finishes and he says, lead us not into temptation, but deliver us from the evil one. That's admitting that we are weak. We can't necessarily face temptation on our own. We need him and we need his help for that. We need him to deliver us from the evil one. And Jesus here, this is him being real. These are all things that we don't have to do. It's just sort of a blueprint or a map. And we're going to get more into it in another week. But he's just giving us suggestions on things that we can pray about. But he wants us to just be real. And your prayer can look like that, but it doesn't have to. All throughout scripture, there are so many different examples of ways that prayer looked. The book of Psalms is full of poems and laments, which are people pouring out their sadness and their hurt and their brokenness and that they're fleeing from enemies and they're upset. There's also prayers in Psalms that are so worshipful, but also so different than that. It doesn't have to look any kind of way, but I wanted to read some examples of some things in Psalms, some real prayers that are featured in the Bible, just because I think that they give us a really good picture of ways that prayer can look. Psalm 142:2 says that David pours out his complaints and he pours out his trouble. This is David fleeing from enemies. We can do that too. We can pour out our complaints and we can pour out our troubles. We don't have to just go to God and say, everything's so good, I'm so blessed. We can say the stuff that's really going on. Psalm 62:8 says, trust in him at all times, you people. Pour out your hearts to him, for God is our refuge. He's saying you can pour out everything that's in your heart, all of the bad and all of the broken, because that's what God's after, is your heart. He wants to see all the real stuff. He's saying pour it all out at his feet, because we can do that. Everything that's in there, because God's our refuge. That's a safe place for refugees. That's people fleeing from battles and wars. Those people carry brokenness. Think about a refugee. God is our refuge. And then Psalm 42:4, it's a lament, and it describes a psalmist fleeing from enemies and lamenting to God. He's lamenting his loss of joy in the Lord, and he says, pour out his soul. That's also everything. That's all of the emotion, and that's all of the hurt. And all of these psalms are very different from each other, and they're very different from the Lord's Prayer seen in the Sermon on the Mount. But what's true and good about all of them is that they're all authentic. None of them are wrong. All of them are real. And we can do this too. We can be real with God. We can bring him the stuff that's really going on, because whether you bring your heart or your soul or your trouble or your complaint or your anxiety or your fear or whatever it may be, whatever you bring to God will bring you closer to him, as long as it's authentic. Be real with God, because that's what he's after. God is after a real relationship with you. He loves you so much, and he just wants to spend time with you and for you to spend time in his presence.